All right, NFL fans, welcome back to another episode of The Way We See It. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Wesley Coleman. Fun conversation having. We're going to have a good one today. Wesley, what's going on?
Not much, man. We're seeing all these pro days, and we're seeing how fast or slow some these college athletes are, and we're ignoring March Madness and just getting ready for the draft in 5
Yeah.
weeks now. 5 weeks, it's crazy.
Yeah, end of April, I think, is when it's slated to start, and it's going to be exciting. And it's like I think it's one of the culminating events of the offseason after the draft is when you have spring workouts, and then there's a lull before training camp starts. But man, it's going by quick. It's hard to believe we're in the back half of March already. But what everyone's talking about this week, especially since Monday, is the freaking Cincinnati Bengals, man. AFC North, your boy Jamar Chase gets paid 4 years, $161 million. And so does his buddy T. Higgins, 4 years, $115 million. So if you do the math, folks out there, not the new money math, the deals for Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, the contracts add up to about $110 million per year. And that's a big number, but a lot of people are expecting the cap to continue to rise upwards of $300 million. So my question or the topic today is why the NFL salary cap is essentially a myth. We've talked about this off air before. First time really talking about it on air. Wesley, what's your take?
Yeah, just real quick, a little cap history. One, it is a myth, but it's funny. The cap's not as old as people think. It started in 1994,
Right.
and before that, you were just on the team that you were on forever. And the NFL Players Association sued, and what basically the NFL said was, okay, well, now NFL teams can just save 37 people hold 37 people to their team forever each year, and then everybody else can sign wherever they want. And so they sued again because that didn't work. So the first cap was in 1994 at $34.6 million. And here we are. I mean, not that crazy of a time later, 30 years later, $279.2 million. It's crazy because I'm guessing if people are listening to this that are born after 1994, they think that's a really long time ago. But for guys like us,
Yeah.
1994 is not that long ago. I was driving a car in 1994. So
I wasn't driving, but I could tell you a lot of players on that 94 Steelers team that went to the AFC Championship game and lost to the San Diego Chargers. But still, I digress. Go ahead.
I mean, what a change. $34.6 million to 279.2 in just over 30 years. It's crazy. But to answer your question, there's a lot of teams have found ways to circumvent the cap. Most teams do it. Some teams, especially one team that I'm close to, completely ignores the cap way more than everybody else. There is always multiple national media putting articles out about the Saints are in cap hell because the Saints are always, before the first day of the year, $60 to $100 million over the cap.
Yeah.
And it, in the grand scheme of things, hasn't affected them a lot. And they've been doing that for, since before we won the Super Bowl in 2009. That's kind of been a thing. It's the way the Saints run their team. What do you think? I mean, are you on this side? Like, are you just becoming a believer because of what the Bengals are doing and this huge money we're seeing? Or are you still pushing back that teams need to be a little more organized with their money each year?
The cap is the way I describe it to people that aren't really like in the know with how the cap works is it's fluid. Yes, there's a hard number and you do have to be under that number before the league year starts. But getting to that underneath that number is not as difficult as you think. It's redoing a contract. It's redoing a contract and building or signing a contract that has void years built into it. Like there's hundreds of ways for these people who are capologists for these NFL teams to work the numbers. And if you can look at the Cleveland Browns and how they manufactured space while still managing that ridiculous Deshaun Watson contract, that should be evidence enough that the cap is fluid. I want to make sure that everyone understands when I say that it's fluid is I'm not preaching that it's fake. It is real. You do have to be below that number for the league year, but after that and getting to that number, and it's not shady because they allow these things to happen. Like some people say, oh, like they're breaking the rules. No, they're not. They're following the rules. If you want to make this a really hard cap, then you say you can't put void years anymore. Like void years are not allowed. Restructured contracts. You can't kick the can down the road only so many years. They'll never do that. The NFLPA will never allow them to do that because that's going to restrict what the players can make in the long run. But I think the only way that the salary cap becomes a serious issue, and we were talking about this right before we hit record, is if the cap goes down. And that's only happened one time since the salary cap started, like you said, in 1994. And that was after the COVID year. And teams like the Saints and the Steelers were screwed. And that was the only time the Steelers have used void years. They had to put void years into Ben Roethlisberger's deal to kick his can further down the road. I don't know. Like, I don't think it's bad. But I do think that it's kind of an illusion for a lot of people when they see the number on the graphics that say the Saints are minus $40 million in cap hell. 2 or 3 moves and they're fine.
Yeah, I mean, people are always going to find different ways and things to complain about. And I can see both sides of when you hear about we're paying somebody $20 million who no longer plays for us, where you get stuck on that. I can get that. Here's a couple like just basic things about the cap. So one, we see a lot of time like player X restructured their deal to help the team. Complete BS. The Saints, for instance, every single contract they put out, it says we can restructure your deal anytime we want without telling you, and you get paid your money in the same order that you normally would. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't. All it changes is what year the money goes towards in the salary cap. So the players aren't helping with that. The players are getting their money. And in fact, to be fair, the players get their money a little bit sooner when their deal gets restructured. And it's kind of one thing that the Saints have a owner who's very cash flow positive. And it's one thing we've talked about, like teams like the Raiders can't really operate that way because their owners aren't cash flow positive. They don't just have money sitting around. Yeah. And then the way I look at it, I understand what people are saying about, well, I'm paying $15 or $20 million to a player who's no longer on the team. Right. But when he was on the team, you were paying him $15 or $20 million less than you should have. And one of my favorite ways to explain it to somebody is, so when the cap is ascending every year, except for once ever, but it's going to continue to ascend. If I owed you $100, or Jeff, if you owed me $100, would you want to pay me the $100 when you have $300 in your wallet? Or do you want to pay me the $100 when you have $1,000 in your wallet?
1,000.
Right. So it's an interest-free credit card. I'm taking $10 million that I owe you this year when the cap's at 280. I'm going to pay you that $10 million in 2 years when the cap's at 325. I don't have to pay you a 11 or 12 or 13 million because I kicked it down. It's actually a smaller percentage of my cap that I'm now paying you. The other side of it is yes, but now you have another player at that same position that you're paying to be a starter. So I can get that. But in the end, it kind of all works out the same. If no matter what, you add a 10-year span together, you're going to pay out the same amount of money over that 10 years, whether you want to pay it equally each 10 years or all at the end. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's the same way. Even these, we talk about these blockbuster deals like the T. Higgins and Jamar Chases of the world, even these smaller contracts. So, for instance, to give you an example, the capologist for the Steelers, who's now the general manager, Omar Khan, he does not like to operate on 1-year contracts. He loves 2-year deals. Why? He can maneuver the money around. He can say, okay, I'm going to build this contract so that we have a very low cap hit, maybe $2 to $3 million in year 1. Year 2, if we even get to that point, because we could cut ties with you and we only have like 2 or 3 million dead cap hit, and we're walking away from this deal. They don't like 1-year deals as much. There are a bunch of different ways. It's not always just the big blockbuster trades, or not trades, but big blockbuster moves, like we're talking about with the Bengals wide receiver core, that can really illustrate how these teams like to manufacture the cap. And when I say manufacture, I do that on purpose because really that's what they're doing. And so in this case, though, T. Higgins, I have not looked at the years. I don't know if you've seen it, but T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, like how much are they getting in year 1 compared to year 2, compared to year 3? Why are they building it this way? Like you said, when the cap goes up and we have more space 2-3 years down the road, that's when we're going to be paying you more money. And to be honest with you, we're probably going to restructure your deal anyways, and we're going to continue to keep maneuvering it. And that's how the Cleveland Browns are still paying Deshaun Watson. And they gave Myles Garrett a ridiculous contract filled with more guarantees because they know right now, unless something drastic happens, they're always going to have the space in the future.
And so we talked about that if a if the cap goes down, and I don't want to talk about the cap goes down. It happened once. Unless that happens again, it's never happening again. The cap's going to continue to go up every year.
Right.
Here's the one way you can kind of be screwed on this. And it takes two things to happen simultaneously. One, you've done this dragging out contracts, kicking the can down the road on high-priced older players who are no longer viable to play at their position significant snaps, and you draft poorly. And if you do one or the other, then you're still okay, because you can take those players that you're paying starter money to, but now they're secondary players, but you drafted good, so the starters are cheap. So as long as you do both of them, it's fine. But when you screw up both, and the Saints have done this a lot because they've drafted pretty poorly, and they've now gotten some older players. Cam Jordan, Demario Davis is kind of starting to descend. They got rid of Lattimore at just the right amount of time, but they've been doing this for a long time. And this is where you can run into a problem, is if you do it with older players or players that just aren't going to be good anymore, and you draft poorly, they're replacements. Then you get into a position where you've got expensive players that aren't good and young players that aren't good. And that doesn't really matter what your cap is. You just are not going to be a good team. The Saints did a really good job for years. It helps when you have Drew Brees for 15 years, as you know, that played well with every single wide receiver, even if he played with all kinds of undrafted wide receivers for years and did great. It helps if you have a superstar quarterback, but there is very few ways to screw it up. Now, Jeff, do you think that as this cap gets higher, do you think more and more teams subscribe to being able to do this to try to match how crazy the contracts are getting? It feels like to me the contracts are getting crazier than the cap is. I realize the cap's getting high, and yeah, I think it's going to be $300 million next year, but we're talking about non-quarterbacks making $40 million a year and more now. And now we have multiples. It's not just Garrett. We now have Jamar Chase making over $40 million a year. Is this sustainable in any of it, or is everybody going to have to kick the can down the road and pay 3-year contracts out over 6 years?
You know, it's interesting because NFL is finally getting into that NBA Major League Baseball realm in terms of contracts. And when I say that, it's guaranteed money. Like, that's the biggest trend that you're seeing, is that contract duration hasn't changed too much. The biggest number in terms of overall contract amount, the biggest change, though, in contracts, in my opinion, in the last 5 to 7 years has been the amount of guaranteed money in contracts. And I still remember I saw an interview. I don't know if it was an ESPN interview or something like that. And they had a baseball player and a basketball player and a football player, and they were all talking about contracts. And the NFL player was looking at those guys and saying, like, your guys' contracts are fully guaranteed. You know, there's a reason why the New York Mets are still paying Bobby Bonilla to this day in 2025. Like, it's insane, but it's true. And you talk about if a guy gets hurt, hey, you're on the hook for that contract no matter what. NBA players get ridiculous contracts, and like the 6th player on their bench, like, they're not even a starter. The NFL is starting to catch up. These players are realizing they have more power than they think. And so to me, it's guaranteed money is the biggest change. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the way that you're having to bid with these players and keep them. And we went real quick to the Deshaun Watson deal with all the guaranteed money was going to be the outlier. Well, it's no longer the largest guaranteed sum in football anymore. Now, again, that's Josh Allen. Josh Allen got that money when he still had 2 or 3 years left on his contract.
2, I think.
I think 2. So it's pretty crazy where it's going. Does it have to stop somewhere? Does an individual player have to be capped at a certain percentage of the cap? Are we getting there? Does that matter anymore? Like, what do you think?
I think the NFLPA would fight that tooth and nail in collective bargaining agreement sessions and trying to figure out what the new CBA would say. But the owners would be smart if they say no player can carry a certain percentage of a team's overall salary cap. I think that's fair for the owners. The players are going to, like I said, they're not going to agree to that. They're not going to want to see that. Are you kidding me?
That's how we're going to have an 18th game. Really, next to
you're good. I
mean, that's why we're going to have an 18th game, is so the players don't get that.
Exactly. So there's going to have to be a give and take. You want this money? We want the revenue from the 18th game. We'll give you a second bye week, blah, 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 all this stuff. The season will end on President's Day, which will be a 3-day weekend,
St.
and
Patrick's
everyone will
Day.
be
The St. Patrick's Day Super Bowl.
But no, I mean, it's just crazy. You see all these numbers thrown around, and everyone always says, "Oh my gosh, how are they going to do anything?" It's because these people are like these capologists are not just mathematicians; like they're wizards with this type of stuff. It is amazing, and when, like I said, Cleveland, whoever they have running their books, good for them because they're going to get out of this Deshaun Watson thing and not be so strapped that they can't do anything. Now, will they do that with Myles Garrett? I don't know. But what's your final thoughts on this before we move on to some other NFL stuff?
Well, my final thought with kind of mixing these things together with what we talked about with the Bengals and also this cap is just to follow up that the greatest football team in the history of college sports, the 2019 LSU Tigers, have now signed contracts for over $1.1 billion.
Gosh, so that's
Incredible.
Burrow,
And that's
Chase.
just 6 years ago.
Right.
Just 6 years ago. It's
who are those
absolutely
players
insane.
though? That's Burrow, that's Chase. Who else is making up that money?
Okay, so
From that
Burrow,
team?
Chase, Jefferson.
Yep.
You've got Christian Fulton,
Patrick Queen.
Patrick Queen, yes, Terrace Marshall Jr., Grant Delpit in the NFL. Let's see, John Trey Kirkland went to the NFL. Jay Ward, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who just re-signed a deal with the Saints. Clavon Chason was in the NFL. Derek Stingley Jr. just signed his big deal this week too.
Yeah.
Largest deal for the history of a cornerback.
Yeah, we get it. We get it. We get it. The LSU team was pretty good that year. Did they go undefeated?
They did go undefeated. They put up more numbers. They beat more top 5 teams in the history of football. There was Cade York, NFL player for was it Browns this last year? Bengals.
So you said how many billion? 1 point what?
It's over $1.1 billion. And again, it's just 6 years ago. $1.1 billion worth of contracts for that team.
Well, hey, good for these guys. Good for them. I mean, hey, with NFL free agency over a week old now, actually, when this was being published, it'll be a week old at not 4 p.m. Eastern time, but you get it. Some of these guys that get contracts, I call them, there's certain players, we're talking about money, we're talking about finances. There are certain players in certain sports that I call them my financial heroes because they get paid these ridiculous contracts and yet they never have to do anything. Matt Flynn is one of my financial heroes. Do you remember Matt Flynn? He played for the Packers.
He went to LSU.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. He plays for Green Bay, fills in for Aaron
bring
Rodgers.
It together.
Yeah. Has like four really good games to end the season. Who signs him to a monster deal is Seattle. Who does Seattle draft? Russell Wilson out of North Carolina State, or might have been Wisconsin. And Russell Wilson ends up winning the job. Matt Flynn holds a clipboard for the rest of his career and just reaps the benefits. Like, it's incredible how much, good for these guys. Dan Moore Jr., left tackle of the Steelers. He gets an $80 million, $50 million guaranteed for the Tennessee Titans. He is not that guy, but good for him. I'm not going to hate on these guys. Their careers are so short. Get it while you can. That's what I say.
Mine's Chase Daniel. He was a quarterback in Southlake, Texas, a few miles from where I went to high school. He went to Missouri and then came in career backup. I think he's listed at 6 foot tall. He is not 6 foot tall, but career backup with the Saints, Chiefs, Eagles, Bears, Lions, and Chargers. Career earnings of $41.8 million. Got a Super Bowl ring. Was in the NFL for 14 years. Pretty cool life being around all those guys and being on the sideline and doing a great job of holding that clipboard. And he actually now breaks down NFL film and is incredible. He's going to be a good coach one day. But $41.8 million for having the best seat at any football game for 14 years. It's pretty awesome.
Because it's not like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who got his brains beat in on a certain occasion. Like, Chase Daniels did not have those hits. Like, he played sparingly, but he did not have those hits. You talk about, Fitzpatrick, Fitzmagic, as he was called on Tampa. Like, that dude took a beating in more than one location. Actually, in a lot of locations. Oh man, anything else going on in the NFL you want to bring up?
No, it's interesting seeing the numbers coming out. You think we're gonna get 2 quarterbacks taken in the top 5? Does that happen? I mean, we know it's Cam Ward. Is Shedeur Sanders getting taken in the top 5, or is his possibility of falling?
I'm really I don't know, when is Colorado's pro day? Do you know?
No, but I believe it's coming up soon.
Yeah, that'll be telling. That'll be telling for me. He didn't
What if he
throw
just
at the
doesn't
combine.
throw? He's like, nah.
Well, you might as well just say I want to be a day 2 pick then or something. They're going to want to see it. Like they're going to want to see it in person. They're going to want to see how he handles the pressure of having scouts there watching. I'm going to say no, that there's not 2 quarterbacks taken in the top 5. I do think there's 2 in the top 10, but I don't know if it's Shedeur Sanders. I
Oh,
wouldn't be shocked if Jackson Dart gets way overdrafted, even though he comes from a gimmick school like Ole Miss.
he does, and has a the gimmick offense that he played in.
Yeah.
Did you know that so far this year there have been no trades of any first round picks, and it's since 1993. This is the closest that it's been to the start of the NFL draft without a first round pick being traded.
Well, let me ask you this. Speaking of that, do you think the Tennessee Titans will actually pick the first overall, or do you think they'll give that up?
They'll give it up.
You think they will?
Yeah, I think the Giants end up moving into that spot
to take Cam Ward.
Yeah.
Wow.
I do.
But Tennessee doesn't have a guy. That's the thing. Like Will Levis is not the guy. Don't tell me he's the guy. He's not the guy.
I mean, they let Mason Rudolph get out of the house. I mean, just what are you going to do?
Oh, Mace, he's back. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I get it if you had a guy. Yep. And the Browns, maybe they jump up unless they're planning to roll with Kenny Pickett.
I could see
Super Bowl champ.
There's a lot of talk just in the last few days coming out about the Browns and Shedeur Sanders. There's been a lot of that. I mean, what a pairing! What a pairing! By the way, did you on your other show give a shout out to Deshaun Watson on his marriage? That he just got married last week.
Yeah, he got married or engaged. Which one is it?
No, I think they got married. Maybe they're just engaged.
Okay.
Oh, maybe it was engaged. I tell you what, though, huge ring, and she definitely looks like she has strong hands.
I was gonna ask what her occupation was.
Speaking of quarter,
go ahead. Go ahead. I was gonna say, speaking of strong hands, we have never talked about Justin Tucker. I'm just saying, we buried Deshaun Watson, and it seems like Justin Tucker's nonsense has just been kind of brushed under the rug. What the hell's going on there?
I mean, he did start missing a lot of kicks this year. I think there's going to be a mutual, hey, you don't kick for us anymore. And he's like, oh, you know what? I don't go. I'm just going to go. I think he's probably, if any of this is real, he's not. He's going to exit the spotlight before the start of the next season.
I'm surprised they haven't cut him already, to be honest.
We'll see. We'll see if it's real.
Yeah. Old Justin Tucker. Well, the AFC North is a lot of fun, isn't it?
But speaking of quarterbacks, the last time that when that draft did happen, when a first round pick wasn't traded, it was traded 5 days before the draft in 1993, and the Chiefs traded their first round pick for the greatest quarterback to ever walk the earth, Joe Montana.
You think Joe Montana is the greatest quarterback to ever walk the earth?
Yep.
Wow.
I think it's close. I'm not going to be mad at anybody for saying it's Tom Brady. I watched those games. I know what he lived. I don't know of any of the quarterbacks that played the last 15 years could have lived through the 80s and 90s.
I thought you were going to say Derek Carr.
I don't know. Maybe he could have. Maybe if Tom Brady plays back then, he wins all the Super Bowls. And I'm going to call it, if anything, I call it a tie. I understand people that say Tom Brady's the greatest, won a lot of championships. I'm not going to argue against you. For me, Joe Montana is the greatest quarterback I've ever watched play football.
Joe Montana had the combination of, so like everyone talks about, like Steeler fans will always say, no, the original TV of Terry Bradshaw. Look up Terry Bradshaw's statistics.
It ain't great stats.
No,
it ain't.
He was a big game quarterback. He played best when it mattered the most, and that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. If he doesn't have it, if he's not a big game quarterback, the dude is benched. He actually got benched during his career. I don't know if people know this or not, but he was benched multiple times for other guys. And they just had to go back to him all the time. And then finally, he kind of got his feet underneath him. He and Chuck Noll did not agree on much. We'll put it that way. But I would probably go with Montana. Big game quarterback, never lost a Super Bowl.
Never.
Very successful career. Had the stats to back it up. not Dan Marino stats, but still he had the stats. Tom Brady, I hate the guy, but he's going to be up there. He's in the discussion.
You gotta be.
Sure.
I'm not. I don't hate on it.
I do. I can't stand him, but that's neither here nor there. I thought for sure you were going to say Derek Carr was the numare 1 on your list, and then Joe Montana is a close second.
He's got some years left in his career to prove his worth.
Are they really going to roll him back? Like I was shocked. I thought the Saints might be.
You have no choice. We've restructured his deal. His salary is $1 million. We kicked $39 million down the road. We are on the hook for 39. Stupid rumor came out that the Saints were looking to trade him. We're not going to trade him in his $1 million salary now that we're paying him $39 million.
Yeah.
No, there's no trading.
You have to be pretty. There's a very short list of players like the Russell Wilson out of Denver, where they say we don't want you so much that we will pay you to go somewhere else.
Let me remind you that after week 2 last year, the Saints had a top 3 offense in the history of the NFL after 2 weeks.
I do remember that.
So 91 points in 2 games. So everybody just slow down with the Derek Carr hate. The Saints are getting healthy.
It took 6 months, but they're getting healthy.
Did I convince you?
Oh man. Well, I'll tell you what, week 2 in the NFL free agency is just going to be, I don't know. It's crazy. Not for the ways that we thought. I feel like this free agency class wasn't that great anyways. It just feels like there's a lot of little low level signings. You're getting a lot of contract stuff. Couple things to keep your eye on. Will the Steelers extend TJ Watt? He's heading into the final year of his contract. That's going to be 31-year-old player, former defensive player of the year. We get that. Still pretty good, but how much are you going to pay that guy? How many guaranteed dollars? Like
if they're not re-signing him, you have to trade him, right? I mean, y'all would get.
That's what you would think. You would think because
y'all would get crushed if you traded him.
I don't know if I honestly don't know if the hate and vitriol would be as bad as it would have been maybe 2 years ago. I think there's a lot of Steeler fans that see that he's still a viable asset right now, and his stock is only going to go down. So, like you said about Lattimore for the Saints. They got rid of him at the right time. You get rid of him
a year early, not 2 years late.
Exactly. So
TJ Watt is involved in one of my favorite things to say about the history of the NFL is that the Dallas Cowboys desperately needed a defensive end and pass rusher. And instead of drafting TJ Watt, they drafted Taco freaking Charlton. It's just one of my favorite things ever is that they did that because
at one point the Steelers had both TJ Watt and Taco Charlton on their roster. All right, man. It's been a good show. Any final thoughts before we call it?
No, man. I'm ready to see. I'm ready for this draft. It's 5 weeks away, and then honestly, it sucks when the draft's over because we're gonna hit like there's gonna be like 3 or 4 days of people signing so that they don't count against the comp picks.
Yep.
And then dead zone.
Right. Well, individual teams have their workouts. I find that very interesting, and it's something. But yeah, dead zone pretty much. But we're not going anywhere. The way we see it will continue no matter what. But Wesley, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me at WhoDatWesley13. We can talk about Roy McIlroy winning his TPC, and you'll find me in Jeff's comments every once in a while torturing him about any dumb thing that the Steelers do. Jeff, where can we find you?
Steelers coverage, Steel Curtain Network, wherever you get your podcast. You can also check us out at steelcurtainnetwork.com. Find me on Twitter at Hartman, HARTMAN_PIT. Yes, I do tweet about golf and the NFL, so check me out. Wesley, man, thanks for your time. We'll talk next week.
Thank you. See you next week.